email saying who's going to be there, and you'll wonder who on earth all these people are. The first person you'll meet for you is my brother George, who's doing our guide, and his American wife, who's from Iowa, Iowa, who's called Jan. And then when we end up at Philip and Susie Wingfield's house, that's the very last item of the whole thing, the following people will be present. First, a man with the incredible name of Turtle Bunbury, who is an author, and he wrote the history of the, I don't know, history of the, I've forgotten the word, Adler in German, what's that in English? The titled people, the wrong word, in Ireland. And volume 4, I think it is, includes a huge bit about the Wingfields, full of photographs of all the Lords Portscourt, where Anthony Wingfield, or Anthony Portscourt, as we should refer to, is the 11th Lord at the moment. So Turtle Bunbury will be there, and he's giving a talk after dinner. We're all going to be in the same room for dinner, this email says. And then Philip will stand up and say, this is Turtle Bunbury, and we're going to talk, going into the talk next door, which will be roughly about his book. And also present there will be Grania, who is even older than me. And Grania, I've got no surname, Languish. Yeah, her husband, Lord Hercules, he died 3 or 4 years ago, so she's lost him. She then lost her brother, who was the 10th Lord Portscourt, Mervyn, who is Anthony Portscourt's father too, who died, as you know, last year. Yes. And she's just lost, we've just been informed, her brother, Guy, who had speech problems and did everything sort of on machines and so on. And he emigrated to California. He joined the society in about 1999, and he left in about 2007. So she's lost in the last 2 years her brother, who was the last Lord Portscourt, and her other brother, who was Guy, who was a member.
So she'll be joining us for dinner at the event that we have with Phil and Susie. So.
Right. And I've been asked to mention as the second sentence, that's a rather long first sentence. The Christmas cards here, silver Christmas cards, are on sale. £5 for 10 with envelopes, sale in aid of Wingfield Church, which you see on here.
Thank you.
Thank you. And now Peter is going to say a few words while we're here. So you can start when you're ready.
Right. Well, we've made it inside the college at last. Instead of being in the church, we're now in the college itself. As I mentioned, 10 priests lived here. 10 priests looked over by a master of the college, a warden or master who was in charge of the whole operation. And there were also schoolboys here because it was a medieval school. And apparently Wingfield and Mettingham School, which is just along the river Waveney from here, used to send more children to Cambridge University to continue their studies than any other schools in East Anglia. So we were even outperforming Ipswich and Norwich. So that shows that it was quite a substantial school in those days. Unfortunately, no accounts survive of it, other than that. But you must wonder where all the school children were put. And the answer is that this is only a small part of the whole college. The west front over there, that was one wing of the college, but only one side of what was a quadrangle. Quadrangle is when you have a whole square of buildings, but often with a garden in the middle, like you see in the Oxford and Cambridge colleges, or a cloister at a cathedral. And our cloister was just out there. In fact, part of the cloister survives, which is where we parked our bicycles. You may have noticed when you came in that there's bicycles along there. Well, that is the old cloister. So it wouldn't have been glazed, it would have had a series of pillars on, and you'd have looked out into a garden in the middle, and it would have been surrounded on all 4 sides. But the other 2 sides have disappeared. So this hall would have been one side, and that would have been one side, and then there would have been other 2 sides over there. But we know it's even bigger than that, because when the Bishop of Norwich came here in the 1480s, the medieval chronicles say that he was met at the north gatehouse of the college. Well, to have a gatehouse, it must have been a pretty substantial kind of structure out of wall. In order to have a gatehouse, you had to have a big wall as well. So all of a sudden, you're thinking of something more like a cathedral precinct, rather than a one building, you know. And after having been met at the North Gatehouse, the Bishop of Norwich was then taken to the chapter house to speak to the priests about the running of the college. Well, there's no chapter house surviving anymore either. So from that one medieval document, we know that there were at least 2 other buildings here, probably of some stature and size, that are no longer here. And if there's a North Gatehouse, there's probably a South Gatehouse or a West Gatehouse, because the North is not particularly grand side of the college. So probably there were other gatehouses as well, and other buildings here. So in your mind's eye, you need to create a much bigger building. Even the one you're sitting in at the moment used to carry on going that way. This is half of the full size of the medieval hall. Well, the reason we know that is that from that wall to where this crossbeam goes across is one medieval bay. Most medieval buildings were built on a bay system, which was usually the distance that you could cover with one beam built out of a tree trunk, without the beam falling under the weight, cracking under the weight. So the distance from here to there is a bay, whereas the distance from here to there, it's only half a bay. So it must have carried on going. And the other odd thing is that all medieval halls, without exception, had a low end and a high end. Now the high end is where the high table was, and where the master of the college would have sat, or the lord of the manor, or king, if you're talking about a royal hall. That's the high end. Well, you guys are at the high end. That is the high end of the hall up here. That's all medieval up there, but there's a bit of reconstruction there. You can see the 70s reconstruction of these upper studs with lighter coloured wood. But it would have all been one solid wall. In fact, I have a little picture over here. It would probably look a little bit more like that. I'll pass that round so you can all have a look at it. And there are, of course, the Dullapole and Wingfield shields that we put along there on the top of that reconstruction. This reconstruction is just one image from a moving digital video reconstruction, which is on our website. So if you want to have type in wingfieldcollege.com and have a look at the video reconstruction, because it takes you all the way through the medieval buildings and shows you the transition to the 1600 faith and the Georgian faith. There's also a DVD in the back of the book. It's the same one. So for those of you who have the book, the DVD's in the back of the book, or you can see the video on the reconstruction video on our website. Of course, for all the other information in the book, you need to buy the book itself. It appears that there's one copy left at Amazon. I checked today, and there's only one copy left, which is gathering dust somewhere. Although there may be some in, I think you mentioned earlier, there was some in
We still have a couple in the Wingfield family store.
Well, the Wingfield family store, of course, going to a good cause. There may even be a discount, I don't know. Or maybe extra money charged for you.
Refresh your memory, we actually got them through a publisher.
Excellent.
After Jocelyn and I had visited you.
Yes. Well, the remnants of those few. Excellent. Well, do get them from the company store. In which case.
I have a question.
Yes,
Where's
please.
The fireplace?
Where's the fireplace? Well, that is a very good question, madam. There would have been different fireplaces in different periods of history.
Okay.
In medieval times, they had the fire in the middle of the hall. Now, when they did the excavations in the 1970s, they discovered a large burnt area slightly to the right, because it's actually down here, is where the fire was. So the high table would have been there. We used to think that the fire was always in front of the high table, but sometimes, at least here, it was off to one side. So where did the smoke go?
Yeah.
Well, the answer is up there, because can you see that the rafters up there are black? They're black, it's genuine. That is the smoke from the fire that has actually baked the timbers up there. That's why they're there. So they're a survival.
Well, I see your pile of wood down it. Wait,
So-
there's no fireplace.
The pile of wood, yes, they left that since medieval times as well. But we have lots of open fires here in the winter. It's one of the few ways you can actually attempt to heat the place. So we have open fires and wood burners and all that kind of thing.
Oh my
So in medieval times there would have been a fire here. but the smoke was allowed to go out. There would have been a chimney in the middle of the hall, but it wouldn't have been an open chimney. It would have had a roof on top of it and louvers in the side, slats of wood in the side, a bit like the louvers you see in a church tower, which allow the sound of the bells to come out without the rain coming in. So there would have been a chimney up at the top, or maybe two, which had louvers, so the smoke could get out and the rain couldn't get in. You sometimes see in books about the medieval period that people lived in halls with a hole in the roof to let the smoke out.
Yeah.
They weren't that primitive, otherwise the rain would have come in, and the birds and all the rest of it, the wind would have whistled around. They weren't that stupid. There's a lot of mistakes about the medieval period that print them being savages. They weren't at all. And the chimney here would have had louvers so the smoke would get out without the rain getting in. But there is another question there, which is where the Tudor chimney would have been, because that's another piece of evidence for the fact that the hall has been shortened, is that there's no chimney place, no Tudor fireplace, because by the time of the Tudors, they built these great big fireplaces, and there's no evidence for that. So that must have been in the other part of the hall, beyond that wall. That wall's a later reconstruction, probably 1600s. I suspect they shortened the hall. Because the high end of the hall, these two doors on either side are genuine medieval door spaces, but the ordinary people would have come in from the low end of the hall, which would have been down there. And you'd have had a door on either side, and then what's called a screen's passage, which shields the rest of the hall from the drafts of when the doors are being opened and closed. So you come in on the doors of either side, and then down the screen's passage, and then you come through the middle, and then walk up towards the high table. So the absence of any doors down there proves without doubt that this is a shortened hall. So this would have gone on at least the same again. It was almost certainly a 3-bay hall. This is 1.5 bays. This would have gone on for 3. And for the academic arguments in favour of a 3-bay hall, just read my book. Wingfield College.
And its patrons.
And strictly speaking, and its patrons, not to forget the Wingfield being patron. Yes, that's the and its patrons. So Wingfield College. But this building up here, all of the roof stuff and all of this stuff out here has been dendro dated. Wood has been carbon dated to being 1382. So the building you are sitting in, all of this roof structure and these walls built in 1382. So that's 640 something years. My math isn't quite quick enough, somebody will be able to tell me. But the wing down there was built in the 1360s. So the wing that we'll be seeing a bit later is actually even older than the hall. They must have extended it and made it bigger at one stage and put on a bigger hall than was originally here. So after the first 20 years or so, they added this bigger hall. There's various bits of architectural evidence for that, but I'll leave that to the book rather than bore you with it now. But it is interesting to think what a wonderful old building this is, and the hall was the centre of medieval life in colleges or manor houses or whatever. And you can imagine at this high table that you would have had the lords and the dukes and duchesses of Suffolk themselves would come down from the castle and eat meals here on special occasions. At the high table here with the schoolboys and the priests and the masters, and when the Duke and Duchess have come down, when you saw how grand they are in the church, it would have been a very, very fine occasion. And do you know which day of the year that took place on, when the Duke and Duchess would come down to the college?
The 8th of June.
The 8th of June. What day is it today? The 8th of June. Absolutely. Today is the foundation day of Wingfield College. So it gives me a special pride to be able to welcome you Wingfieldians here on the foundation day of the college. Because it was on this day, in 1362, that the will of Sir John Wingfield was countersigned by the Bishop of Norwich. It's on this day that the foundation charter was signed by the Bishop of Norwich. The building probably began before, but it was June the 8th, 1362. And so every June the 8th after that was the biggest day in the Wingfield College calendar. And they would have a big feast, a big celebration, and that feast would have focused on this particular room with the Duke and Duchess of Suffolk. If they were residents of the castle, would come down here. Because the master of the college was also the chaplain to the Duke. So the master of the college was a very powerful churchman as well, being chaplain to the Duke of Suffolk. So think of all the shields and the wall paintings and so on.
Charles Brandon?
Well, yes, I'll come to him in a moment.
But you say Duke.
Well, the Leopolds were dukes. The last two Leopolds were dukes.
Right, so then he was subsequent, right?
He was subsequent.
Go ahead, sorry.
Now, I'm just going to pass around a few sheets just so that you can see what the place looked like at different times during its history. Because this was actually a two-aisled hall. There were pillars in it. You had big pillars propping up the roof. And here's another picture here of a typical twin-aisled hall, two pillars propping up the roof. Looks a bit more like a barn, really.
Yeah.
So, why don't you pass those around? So there's pictures there also of the restoration work that was being done here in the 70s. So where have the pillars gone? Well, that big beam that goes across the middle here was put in by the Tudors in order to take out the pillars to give you a bit more space here to put tables in. So before that, there's a great big pillar, wooden pillar coming down here, another one coming down just over there. And those of us who want to go upstairs later on, I'm going to take a group round upstairs, and when you look through those windows up there, you can see the structure of the roof much more closely. And you can also see that there's a very fine medieval crown post up there holding up the ceiling as well.
Maybe they should put another pillow here.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think that's why there's a bit of a clue there as to why that end of the hall is no longer there. I think because when they took the pillars down, of course, the weight of the roof is now sitting on this great big beam. And I don't want to worry you over much at this table, but there's a very large crack. There's a large crack in the beam just above this lady's head here. You can see it coming down here. Fortunately, there is a large metal right angle bolted into above it, which is hopefully holding it together for a little bit longer. But I suspect that the tie beam, this big beam over here, at the other end of the hall, I suspect collapsed under the weight of the roof at some point, which is why the great hall then got truncated, got cut short. Because you can see the weight of the roof. I see you've moved now. You can see the weight of the roof coming down into that beam, and the damage it's done here. So I wouldn't mind letting the other end of the hall collapse. Well, that's the half. Yes, that's right. That's the
Yes,
The
agricultural
was
married.
they work in the
Sister
field.
Henry.
Yes.
Where would they
Who would
live?
send their children here? You know, the children need to work at the
Mary
farm.
lived.
right?
Well, that's a good question. I was going to ask that. Who are the children who were here?
So the God.
Well, there was in Sir John's will, there was a scholarship left for poor children to attend. There was a scholarship left for 3 poor children to attend the college, which therefore means that everybody else must have been paying. So usually, as you say, agricultural labourers will not be able to afford to send their children to be educated. The odds are that it would have been the sons of gentry and landowners in the region who would probably have been sent here to be educated. I'm afraid none of the women were. It would have been sons who women didn't go to any of the schools in England, in medieval England at that time. And usually the boys were only being taught numbers, Latin and singing. Now the numbers and the Latin was so that they could then go to university and maybe learn to do more reading and writing, do accounting, that kind of thing. Quite often people who had an education became clerks within either the political sphere, the administration, or within the church. Latin, of course, was the standard language for a lot of documentation at that time was done in Latin because it was a language that worked all over Europe at the time. Latin or French or last of all English, usually Latin or French. So here they were really only teaching Latin, numbers and singing, and of course the singing was needed so that the schoolboys could then troop up to the church every few hours and sing at the tomb of the founders in order to hurry their souls up through purgatory. So certainly the hall here would have been the centre of medieval life, but it wouldn't have looked quite like this because there's too much light in here at the moment, because these windows are Tudor. The windows were put in by the Tudors at the same time as they put this great big crossbeam in and took the pillars out. They also put these big windows in. That window sadly had to be largely reconstructed in the 1970s because the original was getting very woodwormed, but that one is intact over there, or pretty much intact. and this is in fact medieval as well, Tudor. This bottom half was never glazed. There were shutters on this bottom half. Only those 4 square bits at the top. So this would have had some small stained glass at the top, but this would have had shutters to open up. Because don't forget, there was a cloister on the other side of that wall, so it would have opened up and let the air in, but would have been shielded from the weather by the fact that there would have been a lean-to roof of the cloister just on the other side of that wall there. So imagine this hall a lot longer, and probably a Tudor fireplace in the loft part of the hall as well, and a high table over here. And then at some point, probably around about the 1600s, it all got subdivided. So there was a wall running down over there, and there were some boot rooms and parlours over there. This room had a bay window over there, and upstairs was a bedroom. And when you see these photographs being handed round, you'll be able to see some photographs of what that bedroom looked like, with that roof structure right in the middle of the bedroom. And above that was an apple loft. Above the bedroom, an apple loft. So above the ceiling is where you would store your apples over winter to keep them dry, and then you'd go up and get some fresh apples down. So the apple loft used to be accessed through that little square door right up there at the top of the building. So that went into the ceiling above the bedroom, which was above the ground floor room, which is here. So it was all subdivided, and all those walls got taken out in the 1970s by the previous owner to us, a chap called Ian Charles, who lived here before us. So anybody got any questions about the medieval structure of the college? Yes?
Since you acquired the property, I'm sure you had many surprises over, what was it, 10 or 12 years?
12 years, we're coming up to 12.
I'm sure you had, like I say, many surprises, but what was the biggest surprise of historical value that perhaps you didn't know were here or didn't expect or anything? You find any treasures in the walls?
Sadly not. I know the surprise that we like to try and find, which is where William de la Pole is. Because William de la Pole, I mentioned very briefly that he got executed. It was actually a bit more grisly than that. He got murdered. He had his head cut off with a rusty sword on the side of a boat when he was trying to escape the country and fly to the Netherlands, because he'd been accused of treason.
Right.
It's all in Shakespeare, if you don't believe me. And William de la Pole was given a mock trial for treason, executed on the side of the ship, and his headless body was brought back here to Wingfield. And the medieval chronicles say his headless body was brought into Wingfield Castle, where Alice de la Pole, born Alice Chaucer, wailed her lot of sadness at the death of her beloved husband, William de la Pole. And the medieval chronicle says that William de la Pole was buried at Wingfield College. But he's not in the church. So we tell our children to keep their eyes peeled for the ghost of the headless Duke of Suffolk, because the headless Duke of Suffolk is still the myth, so we hope that the headless Duke will be here somewhere, and then therefore maybe his body is somewhere under the floorboard. So we lift every floorboard with care, just in case we find the headless body of the Duke of Suffolk. That would be that might even trump Richard III. You never know.
He couldn't be buried in the churchyard end, like German prisoners were during the war. They would put half, pilots and so on, found dead, half outside the line, and half inside the line. And if the church complained, they said he's buried outside. These people complained, they said he's buried in the church.
He's buried in the churchyard, so
that's where it is.
Half and half. So William de la Pole, we'd certainly like to find William de la Pole, but that's an aspiration. But I do have another aspiration. And I think you can all help me with this one, which is that the discovery that I really want. My holy grail. This is the oldest picture of Wingfield College. You see the original of this, in fact, on the cloister, on the cloister wall. When we go down the cloister wall later, you'll see the original of this. And this is the oldest picture we've been able to find. I, in fact, found this. This is obviously a photocopy, but the original's over there. And it's part of the estate agent details, when the property in the estate was sold in the 1860s. 1864, I think. So you can see a chap with a top hat here and a woman with a large crinoline dress and so forth. And it looks, the front, pretty much as it does now. That Georgian front, that 1780 front on the building here. Now, the castle and the church have been subjects of antiquarian research for hundreds of years. So people have been visiting the castle and doing engravings of the castle. In fact, I had a group man just the other day
He's really
who were kind enough to
interesting.
present me with this picture here of Wingfield Castle, which is very kind of them. So that's the hanging on the wall. So there's a lovely engraving of Wingfield Castle, and there are other engravings and drawings and pictures of Wingfield Castle, and indeed of the church and the tombs in the church. Now, of all these antiquarians and artists doing pictures of the castle and the church, I can't believe that one of them didn't stop outside Wingfield College and dash off a watercolour or a drawing or a picture of some form of Wingfield College before that Georgian front got put on. So it would have looked a lot more Tudor and medieval than that front there, much more medieval. And my holy grail is to find that picture. And I think that if I ask every group that I show round, you hear where this is going, don't you? Every group that I show round to keep their eyes peeled in the auction houses and junk rooms and so forth for any picture of Wingfield College or College Farm Wingfield, because those are the only two names it's ever been under in the last 665 odd years, please let me know. Because I'd love to have a picture of what it looked like before the Georgians put their front on. Because we know that there are lots of mullion windows, Tudor windows in the house, because they survived. The windows are still here on the inside. And those of you who come around and have a look at the bedrooms in a moment, if we have time, you'll be able to see some of those windows inside the house. So there are scars, remnants of the medieval building inside. It would be lovely to know what the outside looked like. So with your help, hopefully I will find that picture. I'm an eternal optimist, as Jane would tell you. And I'm sure we will eventually manage to find that picture of the
We're
front
only
of
going to
the
be here 2 weeks.
You're only here 2 weeks.
But
Well,
we'd
that
like to
picture,
ask this one.
the thing is, that picture could well be in America. Because there've been a lot of collectors of medieval and Victorian manuscripts and documents and so forth. A lot of them have gone to America, and it could well be that it would be in a collector's collection somewhere over there, or indeed in an American university somewhere. Of course, I've done the usual internet searches, but it could be tucked away somewhere. But if you could keep your eyes and ears open for anything to
What's
do,
the date? It would have been
anything before 1780.
1780.
Because we know that this front got put on in 1780 because it's Georgian, it's what we call late Georgian, 1780. That's the front that's on the way in. So anything earlier than that, of Wingfield College or College Farm.
Do you keep a check on each day?
Of course, yeah.
Well, you
Can I
can.
ask you a quick question?
Yes.
You're seeking from here. I'll ask something we're seeking.
Yes.
The left-hand clear-story window was put in by James Reuben Wingfield.
Yes.
Society, still is. Crystal Lake Queen, I think. And when we came on one of the visits, we had this super radio. It was produced by Company A, the television company B. James tried everything to buy that video when the youngest person knew that chance. The television company said, we cannot sell it to you because we did and the other company said, we can't give it to you because we can't sell it to you. I think Ian still wants to sell it. I'm sure the Wingfield Family Society would like to buy it.
I've heard of this video, and I've mentioned it really, as I have lots of other things, but most of them belong to stone boxes. You never actually unpack them.
I suspect he's got it and he'll demand a fortune for it.
I have no idea, but I can give you his current email anyway. So when he gets in touch with him directly, but I have asked him to ask for it. So, you are due in the pub in 15 minutes, 1:45. So what I'm going to propose now is I'm going to propose dividing you into two groups. Those of you who would like to see the gardens can head down the cloister and turn right and have a look round the gardens. We've got a lovely topiary garden there, planted by the previous owner, Ian Chance, which was planted in the 1970s. And if you go through the topiary garden, then you'll see the medieval fish ponds that used to belong to the college. There's one big fish pond down there and another fish pond slightly further up. And you're welcome to wander around and have a look at the wildflower meadows and the plants. And there's a fruit and vegetable wall garden just down there, dating from William and Mary to the early 1700s. And you can wander around the woods, and what I will do is at 1:45, I'll ring a handbell to gather you all back in again. So welcome to have a look around there. Now, anybody else who would like to see more of the college, I'm going to take a group up those stairs, and we'll have a look into the college through those spaces up there, look at the roof up there, and then I'm going to take you through the bridge house, and indeed some floorboards, which date right the way back to the 1360s and the construction of this wing. So you'll be treading on this thing. So, a difficult choice to make. Since you've only got 15 minutes, it'll be difficult to do both of them. But those who would like to see upstairs, then do pop up there. Now, as you go down into down this cloister, look on your left at the old Tudor linen floor paneling, which includes the portrait of Charles Granville, who was the Duke of Suffolk after the Dark War. So do have a look at the portrait of Charles Granville and his wife, Mary Tudor.